Imagine a windowless room, hidden away somewhere in Pyongyang. The air is thick with cigarette smoke and the hum of hundreds of servers. A man, trained since the age of 10 to be a weapon, presses enter. At that moment, thousands of miles away, in the offices of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, $1 billion begins to move. It's not a conventional terrorist attack. There are no explosions or hostages. It's the perfect heist. But then, the unthinkable happens. A hand trembles. A finger presses the wrong key. An I where an O should be. That tiny typo was the only thing that saved the global financial system from total collapse. Today, on Focal Suspect, we go deep into the heart of Unit 180. This is the story of the Lazarus Group, the army of hackers that stopped playing with code and started playing with the fate of nations. To understand Lazarus, we must understand that in North Korea, talent is not a gift, it is state property. While children in the West dreamed of becoming astronauts or soccer players, at elite schools like Pyongyang University of Automation, the best mathematicians were selected for a life in the shadows. They are not garage hackers. They are soldiers with keyboards. Their mission is not personal glory, but the survival of a regime isolated from the world. Unit 180, also known as the Lazarus Group, was created with a cynical purpose: if the world blocks our trade, we will steal the world's trade. But before going after the money, Lazarus needed to demonstrate its power. They needed a stage. And they found it in the most unexpected place, the glittering studios of Hollywood. But not just anyone gets into Unit 180. The selection process is a mix of genetics and fate. The government tracks down children as young as 10 in the most remote provinces, looking for extraordinary mathematical abilities. Once identified, these children are torn from their families and taken to the capital. There, they are taught that the code is their language and the regime their only family. They live under suffocating pressure. It is said that if a hacker fails an important mission, the consequences fall not only on him, but on 3 generations of his family. They don't play for money, nor for fame on dark web forums. They play so that their loved ones don't end up in re-education camps. It is this desperation, and not just talent, that makes them the most dangerous and disciplined hackers on the planet. November 2014. Sony Pictures was preparing to release The Interview, a comedy that openly mocked Kim Jong-un. To the world, it was a joke. To Pyongyang, it was a casus belli. A declaration of war. Lazarus didn't launch missiles. They sent malware called Destover. The attack was surgical and devastating. Within hours, 70% of Sony's digital infrastructure was wiped out. But the data theft was only the beginning. The hackers released the industry's dirtiest secrets, the pay gaps between stars, racist emails from executives, and scripts for films that hadn't even been shot yet. Imagine the panic. A multi-billion-dollar company reduced to using pen and paper because its computers were now useless bricks. Sony tried to resist, but when Lazarus threatened terrorist attacks on movie theaters, Hollywood caved. The premiere was cancelled. A group of hackers, operating out of hotels in China and Southeast Asia, had just defeated the entertainment capital of the world. The message was clear: no one was safe. But Lazarus had just learned something even more dangerous. They had learned that they could win. And their next target wouldn't be a company's pride, it would be the world's money. The attack on Sony wasn't just digital, it was psychological. Imagine walking into your office and seeing a red skull flashing on every monitor with the message, "Hacked by #GOP." Employees will remember that day forever. The coffee machines, the door security systems, the payroll, everything was down. The scariest part was the stealth. Lazarus had been living inside Sony's servers for months, reading every chat, every complaint, every corporate secret. They knew how much each executive earned and what they really thought of their star actors. By the time they decided to pull the trigger, they already had total control over the company's reputation. Sony spent over $15 million on the initial investigation alone, but the reputational damage was incalculable. It was the first time the world understood that a virus could be more effective than a bombing to silence a corporation. February 2016. The Central Bank of Bangladesh. A Friday morning. In Bangladesh, Friday is a holiday. The offices are empty. The security guards barely pay any attention to the SWIFT system printer, the machine that validates all of the bank's international transactions. Lazarus had spent months inside the bank's network, watching silently. They knew exactly how the software worked. They knew when the employees went home. At 8:36 p.m., the orders began flying. 35 transfer requests totaling $951 million. The money wasn't going to random accounts. It was going to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the bank of banks. Lazarus was using Bangladesh's legitimate credentials. To the system, the theft wasn't a theft, it was a legal transaction. The money flowed. $81 million ended up in accounts in the Philippines and vanished into thin air in Manila's casinos. Another $20 million flew off to Sri Lanka. The $1 billion was about to evaporate. Until fate intervened in the most absurd way possible. But how does $81 million disappear in the 21st century? This is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Lazarus didn't use banks to cover his tracks, he exploited human weakness. The money was transferred to casino accounts in the Philippines, where it was converted into gambling chips. They hired mules, or professional gamblers who spent entire nights at the baccarat tables, betting the stolen money. At the end of the night, they cashed out their winnings. That money, now free of any digital trail, returned to Lazarus's hands. The SWIFT system, designed to detect complex financial fraud, was defeated by one of the oldest tactics in history, the gambling table. It was such a perfect money laundering operation that, to this day, most of that $81 million remains untraceable. In one of the $20 million transfers, the hackers were supposed to send the money to the Shalika Foundation. But instead, they wrote Shalika Foundation. An employee at Deutsche Bank in New York noticed the mistake. It wasn't a state-of-the-art artificial intelligence algorithm that stopped them. It was a human spotting a misspelled word. That suspicion froze the rest of the transactions. The $1 billion heist came to a screeching halt. Lazarus vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a wounded and paranoid financial system. To this day, North Korea denies any involvement, but the digital fingerprints are indelible. For years, the Lazarus Group was a myth, a faceless entity. But in 2018, the FBI did something unprecedented. It put a name to the chaos. Park Jin Hyok. Through an exhaustive investigation that lasted years, federal agents managed to trace thousands of digital connections to an email account, kim-hyan-wu@link.com.ph. But Park wasn't a careless hacker. It was human error, once again, that betrayed him. He forgot to log out of a personal social media account while accessing the servers from which the attacks were launched. The FBI discovered that Park wasn't working in a dark basement in Pyongyang, but at a front company in China called Chosen Expo. There, during the day, he developed legitimate software for international clients, while at night, he donned the uniform of Unit 180. The image the FBI released of him went viral, an ordinary-looking man in a plaid shirt with an expressionless gaze. He was living proof that the army of hackers were not aliens, but code bureaucrats, public servants of a dictatorship working office hours to dismantle the West's security. This was not the end of Lazarus. It was their graduation. Today, as you listen to this, they are out there. Shifting forms. Stealing cryptocurrencies. Waiting for the next mistake, or perhaps, making sure they never make one of their own again. I am Focal Suspect. Thank you for joining us on this descent into the shadows of digital power. If this story has fascinated you, subscribe. Because on this channel, the truth is always stranger than fiction.